Thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming to join us today. The inspiration for today's talk, something I was reading in some of Osho's work in his big book of meditation, of 112 different meditation techniques, which is really his interpretation or his exposition of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is kind of a pretty ancient Hindu text that talks about different ways of meditation. And this book that by Osho was actually transcribed through a series of retreats that he gave, where he described the different techniques of meditation, and then he answered and questions that the audience might have about them. And he also explained why each technique was important in its own way. And of course, the idea of the Yoga Sutras and the idea that Osho puts forward is, of course, that meditation is an important spiritual practice, and that if we try each of the 112 different ways, that we're sure to find one that we like and we will stay with. So many times we hear things about, well, we're going to go learn how to meditate, or we're going to go on a meditation retreat, or we're going to go to a workshop, or those sorts of things, and we're being taught one or possibly two different ways of meditation, but they are not the only way, and they may not necessarily be the way that is most appealing to us. Emmett Fox, in his teaching, said that there are seven main aspects of God, is the way he put it: love and truth and beauty and so forth. And he said one of those is easy for us, one of those appeals to us. And the example he gives is when Moses fled into the desert after Moses killed the Egyptian soldier. Moses had to hide, and he went out into the desert. And the desert is typically symbolic of our prayer life, typically symbolic of us getting away from all of the distractions of the hustle and bustle of the world in which we live. And he came to the well, and the well also represents making our divine contact, plumbing the depths, exploring the depths of our consciousness, going deep, going deep. And at the well, he met the seven sisters, who represented the seven main aspects of God. And one of the seven sisters approached him. He married her. And of course, the sisters were daughters of the high priest. So there's spiritual symbolism there. He was making his approach to God. And one of the daughters was easier for him to fall in love with than the others. And what Emmett Fox tells us is that there's going to be one approach to God that we find very easy, and we should find it and we should take it, because that's kind of like our anchor. That's the one we keep going back to. When everything else gets too difficult, we will go back to that one way that is easy. And there's one way that's going to be very difficult. And the way that is very difficult represents our greatest opportunity for growth. So we tend to avoid doing the things that are difficult. We tend to want to do the things that are easy. But if we want to grow quickly, or as quickly as we can, we need to eventually embrace that which is difficult. So in the 112 techniques of meditation, we will find one or two or several that are very, very easy for us. And we tend to use those, and we stay with those, and that is good, because that keeps us engaged in our practice. And then we might find some that we will read and we will say, what? That's impossible. No one can possibly do that. And that will be difficult. And it's a good thing every once in a while to go and work with the one that's difficult, because we will find that there is our growth. So today, what we're talking about, what jumped out at me when I was reading during the week, is this concept of a circle without a center. And last week we talked about detachment. We talked about becoming detached from all of the worldly opinions, our own worldly opinions of who and what we are, becoming detached from our possessions, becoming detached from everything that is external, that is out there. And this just seemed like an idea that just followed along so well that I thought that might be something worth exploring. So what he tells us is that if you think of a circle, you know, it has a circumference, it has an outer edge. And every circle has to have a center. I mean, it wouldn't be a circle if it didn't have a center. That's kind of the paradox of infinity, you know. It is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. So some of the theologians use that as an expression for God. But every circle that we can think of in our experience, whether it be a tire on a car or a bicycle or just a circle that we draw on a paper, in order to be truly a circle, it has a center. And our life is like that. We must have a center. There has to be a center in there somewhere. But we don't quite know where it is. We haven't quite experienced it. All of our experience in life and in living is at the circumference. It is out at the external. It is at the point where our senses meet the world. And all of our opinions of the world, our judgments of the world, all of those things are formulated by looking without, by looking at the external. And the external is not real. It is not real in the sense of it is not what we are. We are not what we see out there. We are not what we hear out there. We are the witness, the observer. And yet how rare is it that we experience the witness or the observer? So I was born in the 50s, and in the 60s we had a very popular television show that ran for a couple of years and was taken off the air in order to make room for Gunsmoke. But it continued to run in syndication forever. It's still running today, and it spawned numerous spin-off series and movies. And of course, that's Star Trek. Star Trek, the original series. William Shatner was Captain Kirk. Leonard Nimoy was Dr. Spock. And the creator of that series was Gene Roddenberry. And Gene Roddenberry was kind of an interesting fellow. He was an airline pilot before he found his fortune as a writer, and he was involved in an accident in which he was near death. And so the legend goes. I can't tell you for sure that it's true, but so the legend goes is in this time of approaching death before he was rescued, he had some type of an experience, some type of a deep inner experience. And a lot of his writings, when we look at them, a lot of his writings, they kind of carried metaphysical messages, you know. In science fiction, a writer can take an issue that we're dealing with here and now, and they can put it in a different time and in a different place, and they can populate it with different characters, and we can watch that show, and we can kind of associate with it and identify with it, and we can kind of get the message. Whereas if somebody came out and they were very straightforward and they said, look, this is what's going on here on planet Earth right now, and it's absolutely crazy and you need to stop it, well, we would get all defensive, you know, we would push back on them. But if it's couched in a different place in a different time with alien characters, somehow the message kind of gets through. So for example, one of his episodes was about the Enterprise comes to this planet, and the people had been engaged in war for such a long time that they decided that it was just too costly. It was too costly to keep rebuilding buildings all the time. So they came up with this treaty, excuse me, and in this treaty, the computers would wage warfare on their behalf. So they didn't have to send soldiers to the front or pilots to fly planes or anything like that. But the computers would play like a computer game, and then every once in a while a computer would send a message, and it says there's just been a strike on such and such a city, and 100,000 of your people have been killed. And what that society would do is they would let the computer randomly draw the names of 100,000 people who lived there, and they would send these people notices, and these people would all report to a building where they would be vaporized. And in their way of thinking, the people thought that this was a more civilized way to do war. It wasn't a lot of horror, wasn't a lot of terror. Just one day you get a notice, you go report to the evaporation chamber, and that's it. And of course, Captain Kirk has to interfere with this. He violates his prime directive not to interfere, and he blows up the computer, and he says, now you have to face the reality of war. You have to stop pretending it's civilized. You have to deal with the horror, and in doing so, you will probably decide that real peace is better than simulated war. And of course, the message to all of us here, on Earth, this during the Vietnam War, was that we, of course, in our homes in America, we tend not to want to see the horrors of war. One of the things about the Vietnam War was it was televised, and that's one of the reasons that people turned against it, because we don't want to deal with the horrors of war. We want to pretend that war is civilized. We want to pretend that, even to this day, we want to pretend that our intelligent ordinance can just go in and only deal with the particular bad person that we're after. When of course that's not the case. If you look at the photos and everything, that's not the case. There's innocent people killed. So my point is, he could tell a story and he could deliver a message, and the message was kind of folded in the entertainment and it would go out. But afterwards it made you think, we're kind of like those people. We kind of do things like that. So the one episode that I think kind of goes in with today's message was called Shore Leave. And in this episode, the Enterprise discovers a previously unknown planet, and they send down their people to explore it, and they check it out, and it's very Earth-like. You can breathe the air, there's water to drink, and it's very green and lush. So they decide to let the members of the crew come down for some leave, shore leave. And the people start beaming down from the Enterprise, and strange things start happening. Just very, very weird things. A knight in shining armor comes riding along, and he grabs one of the female crew members and rides off into the woods, and there he has this gorgeous wardrobe for her to dress when she's dressed like a fairy tale princess, and her knight in shining armor is waiting on her and taking care of her. And another man, he finds a dueling pistol, and he goes off and he engages in a duel with somebody that he always wanted to settle a score with. And Captain Kirk winds up meeting an old nemesis from the Starfleet Academy, and they get into a fist fight, and they continue to fight throughout this episode. And all during this episode, you see these little antennas kind of poking up from the bushes, and they're looking around. We don't know what they are. And then towards the end of the episode, we find out what's going on. And what this planet is this is a recreational planet. And it's run by aliens, and spaceships from all over the galaxy come, and people come down here for rest and recreation. And the way the planet is designed is these little antennas, they can read what's in people's minds, in their inner mind. And then it creates for them the experience that is their innermost desire. So the young lady, as a girl, she dreamt romantically of being swept off her feet by a knight in shining armor and carried off to live as a princess. And that's what played out. The other gentleman, he always wondered what it would be like to be in a duel. And that he got to have that experience. Captain Kirk always regretted not just punching this guy in the nose because he was so obnoxious. So he had a chance to do that. And the people didn't realize what was going on. See, the crew members of the Enterprise didn't realize what was going on. They thought it was all true. They thought it was all actually happening. And they were caught up in the world of appearances. And it wasn't until they learned that what they were seeing out there in the world of appearances was a reflection of what is within, that then they were able to kind of enjoy the experience, to see what, you could learn something, or they could learn something about themselves by what it was that was being created for them, or they could choose to deliberately have a different experience. And of course, metaphysically, we recognize that there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. We are told that it's done unto you as you think and believe in your heart. So it is. So metaphysically, the message that kind of comes through to that is we all live in a world of our own creation that is a reflection of our thoughts and our beliefs. And what we see out there is a reflection of what we believe inside, in here. But it is not necessarily true. It is not necessarily real. It doesn't have the power to propagate itself other than the power of our own belief in it and in the necessity of it. And when I was reading Osho, and he says, we're like a circle without a center. You see, we're all caught up in this world of appearances. We're all caught up in what's happening out there in this world, and we don't even recognize that it is a creation of our own consciousness, a projection of what is on our mind, our innermost mind. And we spend all of our time reacting and responding to what's going on out there. We are completely consumed by it. We are completely caught up in it. We have 24-hour news channels that are constantly telling us every second of the day something that is going on somewhere. And they never tell us anything to do about it. You know, they never give us any analysis. They just tell us this happened, this terrible thing happened. And we get caught up in that. We get caught up in the reality of that. And we never get to know ourselves. Remember the inscription over the doorway to the temple at Delphi said, "Know thyself, know thyself." In the Old Testament in Judaism, we're told, "Be still and know. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know." In New Testament Christianity, we're told that we should go within to the secret place within, to seek the kingdom within. So if we want to understand, perhaps experience is a better word than understand, if we want to experience who and what we really are, we have to stop living life on the circumference. We have to stop living life in the peripheral. We have to stop living an outward-oriented life, reacting and responding to whatever is going on out there. And we have to go and find ourselves. We have to know the self. With a capital S, the divine self, the part of us that is a little spark of God, that which the divine has created out of itself. That is what we're looking for. And we don't know that. We came to this planet like the crew of the Starship Enterprise. We came to this planet not knowing why we're here, at least consciously not knowing why we're here. And we arrived here and we immediately began interacting with the world of the external. All of our senses point outward. Our skin senses the atmosphere around us. Our eyes see what's out there. Our ears hear what is out there. Everything about the mortal physical life that we lead is oriented to the external. And in the Eastern tradition, they say that when the gods created humanity, they wanted to hide a very, very precious gift from humans so that humans couldn't misuse it. And they discussed different places to hide it. And one of the gods said, well, let's put it at the deepest part of the ocean. And the other god said, no. Man's curiosity, eventually they will explore the ocean and they will find it. He said, well, let's put it up at the top of the highest mountain. I said, no. You know, they'll take the highest mountains as a challenge of something they need to climb, and eventually they'll go up there and they'll find it. So they eventually agreed that they would take this most precious piece of information, this most precious jewel that they had, the one that needed to be guarded so that humans couldn't misuse it, and they would put it someplace that mankind would never look, and that is within. that is within. So what Osho is telling us is that if we don't know the center, if we have not made our contact with the center, and it's likely that we haven't, right? Because those who have had this aha, this enlightenment, this mystical experience that we talk about are different. The Buddha, the Christ, the saints, there is this experience of everything. When we look externally, we only experience a few things. Our senses cannot process everything that is out there. We can't see everything that is out there. Our vision is limited, our hearing is limited. But when we go within, we touch that which is unlimited. And while we are looking in the world without, we are separating, we are dividing. This, it's like this, it's not like that. We are naming everything. You know, perhaps in the book of Genesis, when God told Adam and Eve to go and name the animals, perhaps that's when our troubles started, right? That's when we began to divide. And the intellect does that. The intellect divides and the ego fights. So when we are oriented externally, when we are looking from within, without, we are dividing, we are separating, we are analyzing, and we never bother to ask, what is it that we are looking with? What is it within that we are looking with? If you look at the European world, if you look at where kind of our culture and our background comes from, look at all of the sciences, it's only in relative recent times that the question of what is consciousness began to get serious deliberation. The idea was, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. And if I see this, that is the way it is, right? The mind is the ultimate thing that can be trusted. Objectivism, Ayn Rand. You can believe it. You can believe it because you see it. And we haven't stopped to ask, well, what is it that we're looking with, right? Our sciences are oriented externally. What is it we're looking at? Can we weigh it? Can we measure it? Can we reproduce it? Can we make it happen in a different laboratory? Can we analyze it? Can we put the spectrograph on it? Everything is external. And it's only recently in the history of our sciences, recently perhaps in the last few hundred years, that the question of what is it we're looking with even came up. And of course we don't know. It's an unanswerable question in terms of, can you look out there to tell what is in here? Can you experience what is in here by looking out there? There was a group of scientists who met within the last few years, and they were trying to define consciousness itself as being a function of the brain. The sum total of everything that the brain interprets. And other scientists said, well, how would you prove that scientifically? How do you know that? I mean, you can't just say that. You have to be able to demonstrate it. And how would you know that? And they argued that point and decided that they couldn't entirely prove that. So they couldn't accept that limiting definition. So what Osho is telling us is that we do not know with a capital T, the center. We waffle from time to time. We have different centers. You know, we'll speak one way today, we'll speak a different way tomorrow. If we're asked the question a different way, we'll answer it a different way. So who is it who's speaking when we're speaking from these different places? You know, we're speaking from a different center. You know, and you can think of the example of a child. You know, a child who comes home and get a bad grade on a report card, and the parent starts asking them, you know, what was going on? And you get a response. And if mom just stands there and just looks at the child for a little while, the child will kind of mull it around and think, well, she didn't like that answer. Then they'll give them a different, and the child will give her a different answer, and then a different answer. And our position shifts. So Osho gives the example of one of his friends. They were living together, they were sharing an apartment together, and one of his friends came and said, I'm going to go lay down. I have a fever. And Osho said, well, go lay down. And after a short while, the guy come out and he says, no, he says, I don't really have a fever. He says, I'm just angry. I'm just really angry. I was in a meeting and somebody said some mean things about me in front of everybody, and I'm just really mad at them. And Osho said, well, if you're mad at them, go ahead and be mad. Yell and scream and let it out. If you feel like punching them, here's a pillow. Punch the pillow. If punching the pillow doesn't resolve your issue, go ahead and punch me. I'll let you punch me if that'll help you move through your anger. And the fellow said, well, it's, now that I think about it, it's not so much anger. I'm really embarrassed, I'm just embarrassed by what they did. And Osho's point was that within a period of 30 minutes, the fellow went from being feverish to being angry to being embarrassed. His center was shifting all over the place, And we want to think of a ship at anchor, if you go out, even in a small boat, if you go out and you drop anchor somewhere, if you just drop one anchor off the bow and let out your line and tie it off, as the wind and the tide changes, that boat will make a circle. It'll make a circle around the center where it is anchored. So it could be at any position of 360 degrees around that anchor line, where that anchor grabs the bottom. But it has a center and it's anchored. And we, on the other hand, have many centers in our practical life, in the way that we live. And what he's telling us is that we have to find the one. We have to go and find the authentic center. And the problem that we have there, excuse me while I get a little drink of water. The problem that we have there is that many different religions tell us to go within. To go within, to know thyself, to go within. And yet, we don't know what that means. We don't understand that in terms of having the experience to support it. So you can know about something and then you can know it. You can know all about driving a car, but until you get behind the wheel and practice, you don't know it. You haven't had the experience. And if I say to you, let's all go someplace that we've never gone before. Let's go to a country we've never gone to before. So let's say I say we're all going to go to Uzbekistan. Now we've heard Uzbekistan. We know that there's a country named Uzbekistan. We can look on a map and we can find little dotted lines and a little color of a country. But we don't know it. We've never been there. So if I keep saying that we're gonna go there, we can all nod our heads and say we understand what it means to go there, but we don't know what it is to be there. We haven't experienced what it is like to be there. So if we all go there, we go on a trip and we go there and we come back home, the next time I say we need to go to Uzbekistan, we can nod our heads with a different understanding, you see. We have the experience to go with the words. And the problem that we have with the teachings that are telling us to go within, just go within, is we don't really have an understanding, an experiential understanding, a context of what that means. It's just words. It's just words to us. And we have to get beyond the words. We have to get into the actual experience. We actually have to find the witness, find the observer, find the beingness that is within. And I guess the first step to doing that is to come to some type of an agreement with our own self that we're not going to find it out there. It is not out there. See, out there is the world of doing. It is the world of activity. And what we're looking for is the world of being. And it's not out there. And we can understand that many teachings tell us it's in here. Know thyself. Go within. Be still and know. Go to the secret place within, where you'll find the Father, and pray. So our first step is a willingness, as we talked last week, a willingness to detach, a willingness to disengage, a willingness to give up the drama and the dream that we are stuck in, because we came to the planet without the instructions, or without consciously knowing the instructions. So we spend our whole life in a crowd. Even when we're alone, we spend our whole life in a crowd. The mind is crowded. There's things constantly going back and forth in the mind. This is what the Eastern teachers call it the monkey mind, or the grasshopper mind. It's constantly flitting from here to there to everywhere, but it is never at the center. It is always moving around the circumference. Even when we sleep, our dreams are crowded and populated with many different characters, and yet they're not there. It is all a projection of our own mind. We are the only one there. And yet we imagine all of these other people there, and we believe that they are real. So even while we are asleep and dreaming, we are not our authentic self. We are divided amongst all these other characters. When we are awake, we are divided, our attention, amongst all the external things. And what Osho is telling us is we are not really alive when we are living in the external world. Our definition of being alive in the external world means I'm not dead yet. That's what it means. But we haven't tapped into our passion. We haven't tapped into our purpose. We haven't tapped into the essence of who and what we are. So our first step then is a willingness. Are you willing to let go of everything out there? Everything. Everyone, everything. Let go of it all. Are you willing to let go of it all? And are you willing to go within? And then the second thing is are you willing to find for yourself the technique or techniques that allow you to do that? Dr. Dennis Merritt Jones one year in Silmar gave a talk, and he asked people how many people had a room in their house that was dedicated for the purpose of washing their bodies. And of course everybody did. Everybody's got a shower and a bath. He said, how many people spend time actually using that? And of course everybody raises their hand. Of course everybody takes a shower or a bath. Everybody cleans their body. He said, how many people have a place in their home dedicated to cleaning their mind? And how many people actually use it? And his point was that we are caught up in the external, and we take care of the external things, but we seem to neglect the internal. We seem to neglect going within. So it becomes a matter of, are we really going to do this? Are we really committed to it? Or do we want to live our world in this drama of the externals, even knowing that everything that's out there is a projection of our consciousness? Even knowing that all of that is not real, it has no power to propagate itself. So one of the first techniques that we can consider is to close off the senses. Right? Take time to be alone. Take time to be still. Take time to know. And I'm not talking about listening to some type of a chant. Those are different techniques, and they're good in their own right. But at this time, I'm talking about nothing. Nothing. You can wear a sleep mask to close off the eyes. You can put earplugs in to close off the ears. And you can even take your hands and you can close your nostrils and cover your mouth. Not even breathing. Completely closing off the senses. So in this act of closing off all of the externals, what happens is the internal starts to reveal itself. In Osho's terms, it's in the third eye. It's in the space between the eyes, which is not a physical space, but a metaphysical space. But we start to experience that which is within. Now, of course, you're not going to do this forever. You can't hold your breath forever. And he says, use your fingers to squeeze your nostrils. You don't want to put plugs or anything in there because because you use your fingers, and as if you would start to go to sleep, you would let go of your fingers and you'll be able to breathe. So you don't want to do anything dangerous. But you just want to momentarily and spontaneously, you don't want to say, well, at 5 o'clock, this is what I'm going to do. Just spontaneously, you want to be able to find a way to close off everything. Don't think, don't expect anything, don't try to make anything happen, but just close off the externals. And we find that as we do that, then we can carry over into our waking consciousness the recognition that we want to be detached from the externals. We want to be more focused within. So another technique that we can use, another thing that we can do, is to try to center ourselves in the heart, and center in that in that context means place our attention in our heart. You can place your attention anywhere on anything. You can, and part of the reason that we do single point meditation is to learn how to do that. Focus on your breath. If you have an ache or a pain, you can make that the center of your meditation. And you'll find that once you focus on it, it moves, it goes away. If you're being distracted by a noise, make the noise your focal point. You can make anything a single point of meditation. So what we want to do is make the heart the center. Right? And one of the things that we teach is when you're in your meditation, just become aware of the area between your armpits. Just become aware. And as you breathe in, let your breath come into that area. And as you breathe out, let your breath come out from that area. And you might do that for 15 or 20 minutes, or at least as long as it takes you to take a shower, But just let the heart be your center of awareness. And another technique that he gave, and it's kind of amusing to me, but I've read it before. I've never tried it, so I'm going to have to try it to some extent. And that is to imagine yourself headless. Just imagine yourself headless. And the reason for that is that in our culture, we have agreed that the head is where we are, right? If you ask people, where does your thinking take place? Hold up our finger, we'll point to the head. Other cultures would point to the navel, to the belly. So the center can be everywhere, but we are so identified with it being in the intellect, in the head, in the brain, that's where we point. And he says, imagine yourself headless. Look in the mirror and imagine what you're like as the headless horseman. Imagine you don't have a head. How are you perceiving things without your head? How are you knowing things without your head? How are you feeling things without your head? And when we do that, what that tends to do is it tends to move our awareness down into our heart, down into our heart center. Try to experience, the next technique, try to experience things in the heart. When you listen to music, try to listen from the heart, not the head. There's an old saying that says you got to smell the roses, not analyze the fragrance. If we analyze the fragrance, we're doing it with our head. Can we just experience the music? If we are with a loved one, can we just experience our loved one? Can we just be with them? Osho relates a story of he went to stay with someone he knew who was a high judge in the Indian court system. And he was staying with them for a few days. And one day the lady of the house came to him and says, I wonder if you'd do me a favor. She said, I would like you to have a word with my husband. He respects you and he'll listen to you. And Osho said, well, what do you want me to talk to him about? And she said, even in bed, he's still the high judge. She said, I've never had a lover. I've never had a companion. I've never had a husband. I've always just had a high judge. and I want to know him as other than the high judge. I want to experience him as something other than the high court judge. So if we think of ourselves as headless, if we start to think of ourselves as saying, how does my heart experience that? Not what does it mean, not all of these other things that we try to weigh and analyze, But how does my heart experience that? Ask yourself why you love your beloved. And if you have a list of reasons, you're loving with your head. How does your heart love? So can we open ourselves up? What this all gets down to is can we let go of the externals and let go of the ingrained belief that we have adopted from race consciousness and from our parents and from our teachers that the world out there is the real world, when it is not. It is a projection of collective consciousness. Things are the way they are because the balance of power in collective consciousness believes that's the way it should be. And when that changes, the appearances shall change. Can we be willing to sit down and say to ourselves, I really don't know who I am? I understand what they're telling us when it says know thyself, but I really don't know who I am. I really don't know that divine presence, that spark of the divine that must be within me. And I really want to get to know it. I really desire to know it. Can we be willing to stay in the middle? In the middle, not get caught up in the extremes. Just in the middle. Just being. Just mindful. Just aware. Just here. Can you imagine if we one day took our cameras and our microphones and we were able to sit down and interview God? And ask God to describe itself. Do you think it would talk about out there the activity of the doing? Or would it talk about the being? Remember in Exodus when Moses receives the 10 Commandments and he's talking to the burning bush, which by the way, the burning bush, the fire that does not consume, is a metaphor for meditation, for the ecstasy of meditation. So the real meaning is that in the ecstasy, in the passion, in the burning of the meditation is when Moses received these commandments, is the way that you would interpret that metaphysically. But nevertheless, in the story, the way the story goes, Moses says, "Who shall I tell the people gave me these commandments?" And the divine's reply was, "I am. I am." Anything else is in the external. Anything else is on the circumference. Anything else is not real, but subject to change. The I am, the isness, is the center. I invite you this week, make some deliberate efforts. Take some time. Take some time to be alone. Take some time to withdraw from the world around you. If you have a sleep mask, try a sleep mask. If you have earplugs, try earplugs. If you're comfortable with it, try stopping the breath for a moment or so. Try stopping everything. See what it's like to just be. Just be. The very love of God has created each and every one of us out of itself. And it is still with us. It hasn't abandoned us. Our hearts beat because it is with us. Our lungs take oxygen out of the air because it is with us. Our stomachs digest food because it is with us. And our ultimate purpose, our ultimate reason for being, when we awaken to this, why in the world did we come to this planet at this time, is that it is a perfect place and it is the perfect time for you and I to go within and be. And so it is.